So it was probably the summer of 2017 that I like, now it's like all fuzzy. Like, what happened after that? I don't know. Like something there happened and then I felt better. But yeah, that's how close it was. And even now it's like January 2018. It feels like a million years ago. And I'm also thankful, like, because of that, because of like the current way that I feel about my debt, I'm thankful to be like, I mean, besides being able to make payments, the most, ugh, I can't talk, sorry. I feel like it's like pulling teeth to get this out, and I don't know if it's coming out slow or fast or whatever. It's just, it's a lot, and it's not like strung together well. It's just, yeah. But in this fourth phase, because of the things I just said, I think out of everything, the thing I'm most thankful for is to not feel the solitude that I felt in the past. That was like a theme. I felt very alone with my debt because of the shame and also the lack of support. And but I'm also really happy too that I got to live like on both sides of the coin. Like I would have never understood like the emotional and the, yeah, I guess it's just the well, the mentality and also the level of like emotional messiness that comes with debt. I would have never got that because when I first started phase one, it was like a total mystery to me. Like I knew people got trapped, I didn't know what it was. And then going through it and coming out of the other side, I understand that it's like having debt in your life and incurring it is almost like an entire, it's like taking everything in your life that you're afraid of and then putting a number to it. So it's like you hate yourself. You hate yourself worth $1,000. You hate yourself worth $5,000. You hate yourself. You hate yourself worth $12,000. Can you get away from that $12,000 version of, sorry, 12,000 version embodiment of hate, self hate? Like you see it on paper, and that's the part that makes it hard because you're staring at it every day. And I would have never, ever, ever, ever known that that's what it was until I went through it. Because even at that, there's no way that you could have told me that I had any type of shame or problem with feeling a lack of support or wanting to be dependent on people or wanting other people in my life to help me create abundance. You couldn't have told me that before because I was all about making my own money and not needing help from anyone. And on the also along with that, kind of like looking down on people who did need support financially. So going through it, like being on this side and understanding that debt is just a number, and then going through it where the debt represented something much bigger than just a lack of money or a thing to pay every month, I totally understand how and why people would need help getting out of debt. Like not just the money that comes, not just someone saying like, hey, here, you're out of debt, there you go, but like understanding why those people need a certain type of support, like not just the money, but also like a forgiveness for the debt, like an emotional forgiveness for the debt, like not punishing people for helping them. It's because it's coming out choppy. Sorry. I was like trying to think of a person. I was imagining someone's face and I was imagining like the people who get angry for what is it called? Like when people get debt forgiveness or when people get like just a hand slap for getting out of bankruptcy and then they keep moving and like how angry people get. Like well, let's use Trump. Remember when he like bragging about, he wasn't even bragging. He was just like, people were like uncovering the fact that he had been bankrupt all this time, or he had filed for bankruptcy like multiple times and then just kept living as though he was like a big like hotshot business guru, whatever. And people were really mad about that. But it was because the people who were angry didn't understand that it's totally okay to pull someone out of debt and trouble without shaming them. And they feel like it's not okay because they personally think that they are at fault and responsible and accountable for the debt they accrue, not knowing the actual reason they incur debt. So, if in my case, the reason I was incurring debt is because I didn't believe I was worthy of support, and I thought that I had experienced like painful consequences for asking for support. And so I thought that it was better to do what I did, even if it incurred debt. And for you and other people might be different, but what Mr. President Trump understood was that it doesn't matter. Because it really doesn't matter. Like, debt is debt. And it sounds already crazy. It sounds crazy because it's like I'm jumping too far. And you're like, no, you can't do that. But again, I'm telling you, we got to go through the steps. You can't just jump there. So I won't jump there. Let's just hang on. But yeah, sorry. Let's just go back to my lessons because you're like, I know you're not going to accept that because even when I'm saying out loud, I was like, no, that's already hard enough to swallow. So let me just go through my lessons. So again, during the fourth wave, I also learned, like living on both sides of having debt and no debt, I also saw what it takes to thrive in life, like financially, because I told you before what I believed to thrive in life was that you need to save, and it's better to eat Twinkies for lunch and save that $9 than it is to spend a little more and incur debt. And even if you didn't incur debt, it was still better to save than it was better to put money in the bank than it was to invest in yourself or make sure you had a good life. And so somebody who thinks like that won't go into debt because they'll always live within their means. And they'll also value savings more than anything. But at the same time, that person thinks that all of your abundance, all your money, all your good living has to just come from you and what you save. And that's a very limited way of thinking because you're not going to be risk adverse. You're not going to ask others for help. You're not going to try to collaborate with other people. You're just going to try to live off whatever you make independently. And I'm pretty sure that that's not how money's made. And the reason I know that is from talking to rich people. And rich people never told me that they just use their own money to go in. Nope. They told me, specifically one person told me that he used debt. He got a house that he couldn't afford to signal to other people that he's successful. And the signal that he put out went out to very successful people. And when he asked them for money, so again, asking for money is support. It's not the same thing as debt, but it is support. He asked them for money for a venture that he had never done and he hadn't done. And they assumed, because he had this nice house, that he knew how to make money. And then he did. He did make a lot of money, and he's made a lot of money since. But someone who thinks you shouldn't receive support from loans or other people, and you should just save what you make without asking, again, anyone for help or outside injections of money, they would never do that. And they wouldn't even think that was how you made money. They would think that was ridiculous, and they would never even be the person who gave the money. They would never be the investor either, because again, they don't believe that money abundance, financial wealth comes from putting your money out. They'd be afraid of outflow. So, that's something that I can look at certain communities and be like, yeah, they don't get that. Like certain African communities and certain Latin communities, they don't get that part at all. And I know that because I talk to them and live through it and watch how they live, and they can even have 3 paid off houses. They can be retired and whatever, and they still will not invest money or put their money anywhere outside themselves. They'd rather put it under a mattress or in their savings account that has almost no interest incurring than to do anything outside of that. They only know saving. So I'm glad I know more than just saving, and I'm also glad that I understand that it's okay and normal to create abundance and wealth with other people, like the support of other people. Okay. Um oh, yeah, and so that was the next point was I was under the impression that everyone did everything alone. Did did you guys know that? I didn't know that. I thought that people became rich by themselves. That's what I was told. Somebody in my life, an influential person, showed me their bank account and it was like six figures, and I was seriously under the impression that they did that alone. They never broke it down for me. And even when I tried to ask like clarifying questions, they never, ever, ever talked about where it came from. And so the person that did that, they came from a Latin community. And in the Latin community where it was not okay to get support or like to ask for wealth. Like you couldn't ask for money injections without feeling shame. So the person who showed me their bank account never explained to me where or at what points or in what areas they receive support. Because in their mind, that's shameful and not the thing to focus on. They didn't want me to. So like, let's say that six figures all came from them. That's fine. But they would never explain that the reason they were able to save that much was because they got help with a down payment on their house from their parents. Or they never explained that since they had had a two-person income, like marriage, income since they were in their mid-20s, that it was, they had tax cuts and help with paying rent and things like that. Like they didn't explain that to me, and I saw it when I was really young, so I was really hard. Like I just seen it that young, it made me just assume a lot of things and then never question it ever again. But then later in life, when I was like doing the same things and like talking to people, and I realized, oh, hey, like other people's families do X, Y, and Z. I wonder if that person had that same support. And I just never went back and asked them. But I remember thinking or assuming that everyone did everything by themselves. Like that's just what I thought it was. And yeah, come to find out, no, it's not true. And like finding out from people outside of my family, outside of my circle of influence, like rich people, I was like, dude, you guys, what? And they're like, yeah, like it's totally normal. Like why, like even in their mind, they're like, why should I do it alone? Like what's the point of that? Like, no. And I'm like, oh my God, I wish I had known. I'm not that I wish I had known that earlier, but it was like, I would felt a lot less shame and guilt if I had known earlier that people got help like that. And it was normal. Like it was, you're supposed to, or you're allowed to, without feeling any type of like shame, guilt, or being punished for it. And what else? Oh, I also realized that I thought asking for help meant that I was a burden. So I never thought that my debt was a burden or my mistakes were a burden. I felt like me as a person was a burden. So there's a big difference there. So like if if I thought debt was a burden, then I would have assumed that nobody would want me to have it. But if I assumed I was a burden, then then it was more like if I wasn't in people's life, then they wouldn't have to deal with this, you know? And I didn't realize that I felt like a burden until probably like last week or something. I didn't know that I thought that. And since I thought that unconsciously, I assumed that everybody else thought the same way about me. So I didn't understand like gift giving, and I didn't understand why someone would want to help me. Because when I started asking for help, people did help me. And I was like, that's, whoa, like I didn't expect that. Because it went against the belief that I had that I was a burden. But it was like, oh, actually, people don't always view someone who needs help as being a burden. And I think if I had thought about myself, I would have thought that. Because like when I write down, like, do you ever do that? Like if you win $1 million, how would you spend it? when I write down if I do $1 million, how I spend it, there's always like at least 7 people that I would give thousands to. And I was like, okay, well, if I would, when I fantasize about having $1 million, I fantasize about giving this money to people and then like watching them enjoy it. Like, why wouldn't those same people or other people also feel the same way about me? Like, I just didn't think about it that way. It's almost like I thought me just by myself was a burden and like no one else on the planet was a burden, just me. But yeah, I definitely thought like, I not thought, I still think like that. Like, if I won money, I was like, oh, I'm gonna get this person this, and I'm gonna make I get this person a vacation, and like make sure this person's kids are taken care of. Like, that's just, I want to, and so why wouldn't someone feel the same way about me? I don't know, but I didn't think so. So I got to see that like that was a belief I had, and probably maybe to some people it is a belief. I mean, it is true for them, but there are definitely people in my life right now that maybe were even there before that I just didn't realize, that don't see me needing support and help, or just me as a person as a burden. Oh, okay. So now, after all that, there's a bug in here. Follow me and get out of here. Sorry. There's like I keep seeing bugs, and I don't know if it's because the wind is like blowing everything everywhere. But yeah, just like the second bug that I just saw. Okay, so, going through this whole list, going through this whole thing, I started to see that it's not just a personal thing, it's like a pattern. So I think being black and also being Mexican, Latin community, I saw which patterns are from which cultural group. So like the feeling of thinking like you're responsible for your own financial abundance, that definitely came from the Latin side. And then the other side, feeling like you shouldn't receive support from people outside of yourself, that definitely came from like the black side. And I don't mean like black like every black community in the whole world. I just mean black American communities, like people who'd have like the last name Williams, not people who'd have the last name like Matumbe or something. But definitely in our community, we don't know how other people get rich. And from family and society, we are told that us needing support is a nuisance. So the messaging is really weird, right? So if I grew up in a black family that never receives support from their family and is always lacking, and like with every kid they have, they go more into lack and debt and expenditure, then they're never going to have the resources to help their kid. And any kid that comes after that. And even if they did have the resources, like some degree of resources, they're not going to think automatically to support their kid more than just feed them and keep them alive and put them through school and like get them through high school, because they weren't used to receiving that support. So they received a message which was like, I gave you life, I put food on the table for you, and so that's enough. Like, don't ask me for more. And I remember watching too, like one of my cousins, when she turned like 18 or something, and she didn't really go to college, she went to like a community college, her mom was like, you can't live with me. And if you do she's like, you can't live with me, there's not enough room. Again, this is like secondhand story, so I don't know what she exactly said, but something to the lines of like, you can't live with me, there's not enough room. And even if she did live with her, then she'd have to pay rent. And the apartment was like 2-bedroom or something, I think. And the reason there wasn't enough room for her is because they had a roommate who was paying rent. So it was basically like, it doesn't matter if you're family, if you're not contributing, you're just taking, then you can't be here. Like, I won't support you. I can't support you. I don't want to support you. I don't feel like I have to support you. So either support yourself or you live here and you contribute to the rent. And it wasn't a lesson in being independent. I remember that it wasn't a lesson in being independent. And I remember my cousin being like really sad and hurt and crying, not because she got kicked out, It was almost like that. It was the feeling. I remember it was the feeling that she had. The feeling was like, my mom doesn't want me around. You know what I mean? So it wasn't so much the fact that she had to be independent. It was more like, the reason I'm being independent is because me just being in her life and company wasn't enough. I'd either have to put out money or I was a burden. And like, daughter or not, it didn't matter. It wasn't enough. So I remember thinking that that was really weird because, again, from my experience, I didn't have that. I didn't have that at all. Like, I was allowed to stay home or come back home whenever I needed to. I just wasn't allowed to receive support unless I wanted to either hear it from the person giving me the money, or the person giving me my money would at that time dictate my next steps of how I would make money so that they wouldn't have to do this again. Like, the goal was to get me to be self-sustaining always. So either self-sustaining by bailing me out and then controlling my next step, or like, as long as I didn't ask for help, it was fine. Like, they didn't care. So I remember thinking that that family had a very weird understanding of like what would bring a sustainable lifestyle. So having having two family members of the same family have to pay rent when they both can't afford it was not going to make them more money. But that's what they assumed would happen. Like, if they assumed that if they supported the daughter, then they would be out money, and they assumed that the daughter supporting herself would make things easier. But it doesn't work like that, you know, because then you'll have two people in debt, or you have two people who can't support themselves. Does that make sense? Sorry, my throat's getting dry and I'm getting like sinuses or something. So weird. But yeah, so I realized that so then if that happens, if people from Black families have that background support, then when people from Black families try to receive or gather or gain support from society or other people, or in a formal way, like through an institution, it's going to look like they're a nuisance to others, because others are going to assume that they already received the support, like family support, the same family support that they received, and they squandered it, and as a result they now need additional support. So that's what it's going to look like on the outside. It's going to look like Black people need more support than other people, but really what's happening is that other people, and if I had to like be specific, I'd say like Asian, Middle Eastern, and communities of like European descent. Yeah, I would say that those people get support from their family, and it's just they don't even call it support for the family. It's just almost like a built-in thing. Like, they just like, you know, save money from college, make a trust fund, help them invest, or help them get on their feet. It's just a thing that they do automatically. So they wouldn't even call it support or whatever. They'd just be like, no, that's a normal thing. So those people are probably assuming that Black families, Black communities are doing that to their children too. They're supporting them in that way without saying it. And then everything after that is extra. So it would look like from the outside that Black people are taking more than everyone else and delivering less results. So like, they get support from their family and the government and institutions and laws, and they still don't become rich. They still don't make it to the same baseline as everyone else. When really what's going on is like, they don't receive support from home, and then when they try to receive support from other institutions, they receive backlash from everyone, like, wow, you're so annoying. And then in the inside, they feel not worthy of support because that's the messaging they get from home. And then on top of that, when they make their money or whatever, they don't lend their support like the other communities did, because they're not used to doing that. They're not used to seeing it, and they're not used to, it doesn't, in their mind, the support that they got, it doesn't seem to equal the support that they could give. Does that make sense? Like they don't equate what they receive to something that they can give. I'm letting that like marinate even for me because I'm like, I don't know if it's coming out clear. It feels choppy, but that's okay. I'm just gonna keep going. Um, what's the other point here? Yeah, okay. I think that was it. I think that was it. My throat is like dry and tired. And yeah, I don't know. This is like not, I feel like this is not an entertaining episode. And also, too, you're just like listening to me think out loud. And I don't know if it's going to be helpful or not. I just remember thinking while I was walking over to like to record this that these are like, I think, yeah, what's the most important thing when I'm talking about this today is not so much that you agree with what I have to say or that like you follow step by step what I did, but more like putting the idea out there. And the idea being that like we might not be understanding each other and we might not be understanding why and how certain people are well off and they're not well off, and that the common narratives out there are probably off. So if all the narratives out there about building wealth and who's wealthy and who's on top and what help people need is off, then you won't be able to find solutions for it. So if we think black people are off because white people are evil, then we're not going to find a solution for why black people actually are a little bit behind, you know? And you're also not going to be sympathetic to any type of anyone's cause or struggling if you don't understand the lack or the mindset or the foundation, the crumbled foundation they're coming from. So we can't depend on an outside perspective on this. What you, and I guess mine too. Mine is an outside perspective, but at least like if you listen to my outside perspective, it's more individual. So it didn't come from studies. It didn't come from like research or whatever. It came from analyzing my own debt. Yeah. So coming from being able to analyze my own debt helped me see the patterns that also exist in my community. And I'm a part of more than one. So I'm a part of upper middle class. I'm a part of like first generation immigrant Latin, and I'm a part of like black African American community. So I got to see through my debt cycle. Sorry, I'm not really thinking, just talking. I got to see through my debt cycle what patterns are found in my community, and if you, coming from your perspective, look at your cycles, so it might not be debt, it might be how you accumulated your wealth, or it might be your savings, or it might be your bankruptcy. Like it could be positive or negative. If you look at your cycle, you might find patterns that exist outside of yourself, and by comparing your pattern with the patterns and the narratives that are like in the news or in economic studies and things like that, you'll be able to see what part of it is true and what part of it is missing links. Like what part of it is a little bit off, or what they're missing in their narrative. And I think that also goes for any other part of your life or any other narrative. If you can just use your life as a microcosm, you'll be able to understand the macrocosm of everything. And the reason I used a 9-year cycle is not because it takes 9 years to see, but you definitely need more than one interaction with any topic to be able to see it on all sides. So like if you've only had positive experiences with money, you won't be able to see the whole side because you won't have had the negative one. If you've only ever won, like in competition, and you never lost, you won't be able to see the other side of it. And you won't be able to see like what it takes to win in terms of mentality or training if you've never lost, because it's different. Yeah, so that was an exercise in that, I guess, using your life to test for truth in any issue, society or whatever. And I think the next time I do this, I'm going to do it for YouTube. I'm really interested to see what the incentives and motivations are for content creation, and then seeing what's the missing problem here, because there's like a big issue right now with content creation and entitled entitled content creators versus content creators who deserve payment, and then almost like an artificial, I don't even know if it's artificial, I'll have to like dig into it, but like a feeling of lack. Like there's not enough viewers, there's not enough paid advertisements, there's not enough exposure to maintain the level or the number of creators on the platform that are happy and creating. And there's also a lot of finger pointing and confusion from the outside. And I don't know if there's confusion on the inside being the executives or decision makers at YouTube. I don't know if it's intentional or if they really are off mark. I think knowing or being a part of organizations, a lot of times people assume that they know more than everyone else, but then when you're there, you're like, oh, they're off their mark. Like they don't know either, and they're just, trying new things and seeing how they go. And like if they're trying to fix the same problem that the creators have, I'm guessing that they don't understand the whole situation and that their policies are off. It's like they're not intentionally trying to screw the creators over. They're just off. They're not aligned with what would help advertisers and creators. That's what I'm guessing, and that's usually the case. I've seen that a lot where businesses or organizations want one thing and they're totally missing the mark on the key ingredient for success, and they believe something else will give them that success, and because of that they keep introducing policies and ideas that don't yield any results. And then that's when the finger pointing starts, because they're like, well, it doesn't make sense. And I'm like, yeah, it doesn't make sense, but it doesn't mean, just because your efforts fail doesn't mean that they're bad. They could fail to tell you that doesn't work. You don't try different ways to fail the same way. It just means like find your mark before you try again. Yeah, I think that's what I want to talk about next. It feels like really big though. I was thinking about that for a long time. Like, wow, I'm so on the outside that I don't have a lot of perspective on it, but I need to find some parallel, some microcosm in my life that would help me relate. Maybe you have one in your life and then you can just figure it out for everyone else. But yeah, I want to try that again next time. My throat is totally dry, so I think I'm done. I thought this was going to take like 15-20 minutes, and I think it took like a billion hours, and I'm running out of battery. All right, bye.